Buddy.
What's up, guys?
Yo, yo, yo.
It's a good looking squad right here, man.
So we're waiting on some people to pour in here. And then we'll get rocking. Get rocking.
Hey, Jonah, how long do you guys usually go on this call? Just so I'm sensitive to how you guys have it structured.
We'll go up for about 45 minutes or so.
Okay, that is perfect.
Yep. All right. Cool, cool, cool. I blasted it out. Claudia, did the text blast get sent out? There's nobody on here right now.
Yeah, I know I got it.
Okay. This is the lightest I've ever seen it. But we'll give it 2 seconds.
I
And
won't,
then
I
I
won't, I won't take any offense to that.
texted it out here. All right. But we'll get ripping here. So Claudia, you able to hit record and we can get going?
Oh yeah, I already hit record. You're good.
Cool. All right, Paul. Well, brother, you don't need an introduction. And I'm excited. I'm excited for this one because I know we had you on the team call since you came to Pinnacle, but I think I was on a flight or something. And so that was Felix that interviewed you the last time. So this is actually the first time I'm interviewing you since you've been a part of Pinnacle.
Well, hey, man, I'm excited that you're interviewing me. I love Felix, but I'm glad that you're interviewing me this time. Switch it up a little bit.
Well, glad to be. Glad to be. So first of all, if you could, for those that don't know you, kind of give a brief backstory on how long you've been in the business and your experience over the past couple decades. Well, it's been 18 years, right?
Yeah, dude, it's kind of crazy, man. Jonah, my oldest daughter, she just turned, well, she's almost actually 19 now. She's 18 and a half. And like a couple weeks ago, she's like, she's at college. She's like, Dad, I'm like, I like playing soccer because she got a scholarship. She's very athletic. Got it from me. I'm just kidding. My wife tries to take credit for it, but so she's like, hey, I like college, like soccer, but I really want to get into business and I want to do what you're doing. Can I how would you feel about me dropping out? And I was like, heck, I mean, I'm all in on it. I like it. So she just started 2 weeks ago, and man, she's already like helping families. She helped like three families the first week. This week she's at four families. And I was just thinking, like, man, how crazy is it that she's the age I was when I got licensed and started this business? To me, it was just like this, you know, I guess revelation, like, man, I'm old and I've been doing this for a long, long time. My daughter that was just born, she was like legitimately like 2 days old when I got my insurance license and went out and helped my first family. She's now helping her first families the last 2 weeks, which is kind of crazy. Which is a
Well,
beautiful
she's got her
thing.
license and she's going.
Yeah, dude, she's in it. She just rang the bell like
Nice.
15 minutes ago. So, and,
Go.
and maybe I'll talk a little bit about like what it looks like for her, kind of my advice I'm giving to her, and what the trajectory looks like. But the last 18 years, this business has obviously had some seasons and shifts and what have you, but it's never looked this good. I mean, it's just unbelievable what it is. And I started thinking like, because she's like, Dad, can I get some leads? And I'm like, no, you're calling these old leads. I'm going to give you like 100 leads that are like, 4 years old and 982 agents have already called them. I said, that's what you're going to call. Because I started thinking like, is it really a setup if you just get it given to you so easy? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think that a lot of what has led to great growth is, man, we've had some pretty crazy seasons that we've had to navigate over the past 18 years. Like I remember getting started, Jonah, and like the first batch of leads I was
Branding.
calling had like mustard stains and ketchup stains on them because like the guy that liked to dial them prior apparently wanted to eat a hot dog or something. I don't know, but I'm not making this up. Honestly, not true story. And I remember calling these leads in '07, and these were mortgage protection leads, and the loan on it said like 600 grand, and the loan was qualified in '05. This person, most of the people didn't even have a house. So I'm getting started. I'm getting just smoked, and I don't have an expectation. I'm thinking like this is just the way it is. But I'd always tell myself like, heck, if I was going to get hung up on 100 times in a week and I'd still make a couple hundred grand a year, would I be all in on it, or would I get emotional about what I'm dealing with in this session of dialing that I'm having right now? The answer's like no. But a lot of times we don't see it that way. We get so caught up in the emotion of a rejection or nobody picking up or whatever and that it influences our activity, our attitude, and really what we invest back into the business, whether that is our time, our energy, or our money back into leads. And so I started thinking like, man, I believe that I got to a place where we had an organization doing $20 million a month because I navigated some pretty crappy situations and built some great character along the way that really was necessary to lift the weight and host the responsibility of that kind of organization. And so like that's how it started out, was me calling those. So I told her, I said, listen, you're going to call a bunch of these old family, family leads that are, years old and been given away to everybody. And she was getting beat up and she was struggling, and then she got her first sale. And so she's like, what do I do now? I was like, well, what you don't do is you don't go to Nordstrom's and get a new outfit. So that's what you don't do. She's like, well, good. I'm glad you said that because I was thinking about that. I said, what you need to do is take that full commission check and put it back into the leads. She's like, all of it? I said, all of it. Like, you live in my house. You don't got no rent. Put it all back in. You ain't got to pay a bill. And I was like, and by the way, just let me say this. So if you ever did have a mortgage and you had to pay a bill, you're like, shoot, I got my mortgage payment's due on the first. And you're like, I got to pay that. It's $2,000, or I got to put it back in leads. I said, you put it back in leads. You pay a late penalty on your mortgage that's 8 days late, and make sure you're feeding the business. And so it was a great opportunity for me to start kind of coaching her on the way to see this business, because the truth is, it's like flying. I'm getting ready to fly out tomorrow to meet with a big group
Paul,
that's
Paul,
doing.
let me pause you there because
Yeah, yeah.
you made an important piece where being able to, it's so important to treat this business like it's a business. And this morning, I just had a group of 10, 12 agents in my office coming over from another insurance company. And they're all in a pretty tough situation because they didn't manage their finances appropriately. And they're in the office from 8 to 8. They're grinding, but their back's up against a wall because they're like, dude, we didn't invest the way we should have. We made some wrong moves with, these and then whatever else. And we don't have leads. We don't have leads. We're working right now. So what advice would you have to agents? First of all, my first question is just to properly manage their finances.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of liken it to when you're flying, you're on a flight. I got 5 kids. So, bro, like when we fly together, I get like all 4 stewardess to come over and they like, hey, just so you know, if the oxygen mask pops out, put yours on first and then put on the kids. And the reality is like intuitively, you would think like no, my main priority is to make sure my kids survive. And so if they pop down, I'll die while I'm putting theirs on. Well, the problem is, dude, if I'm dead, I might put on 1 or 2 masks and then my other 3 kids die, right? And then, the 2 that lived could, I guess, say that they were dad's favorites because I chose them first, right? But the whole family didn't survive. But if the oxygen mask pops down, I got to put mine on first so that way I can put theirs on. And it's the same thing in the business. The business it's required for the business's oxygen mask to be put on first because that allows that business is what puts your oxygen mask on. And that's kind of what I was explaining to Payne is like, you know, you go spend that lead money because you needed to survive or what have you, or you wanted to go buy a liability or you wanted to go enjoy it or whatever that looks like. Well, now you just took the oxygen mask off the business, and that's the very thing that puts yours on. And so it's kind of like paradoxical, just like being a parent. You think, no, I got to put my kids on. No, no, you got to have yours on first, or else all the people you care about die. And the oxygen mask for your business is lead flow. It's investing back in your business. I mean, Jonah, like when I got going, my second year I made like 250,000, which was a lot, man. It was 2009. It's a different economy of scale as far as what that revenue was then. And that was driving from house to house. I had to drive 5 hours one way and go between appointments. It was like 30-minute drive. So like a lot of my time was spent driving. And so I still sold and worked the same amount of appointments. The difference was my sacrifice required, 20 more hours of windshield time than the average person today that's not having to go spend that time in front of a windshield. But what I realized is that if I'm not putting back into my business is not going to grow. And whatever you feed grows. And so I really kind of had that thought process ingrained. I don't know if it's because I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was 18 and messed me up in a good way. But like, dude, I was making all that money and I had, a house payment that was $1,200 a month, a little track home. I was driving a Hyundai Sonata. that wasn't nice. You know, my wife had like an old GMC Yukon that was like 9 years old. You know, got it used for like 23 grand. And that's not normal for a 19-year-old, 20-year-old that's making, 250 to do that. But I had three recruiters. In fact, my we got our office space finally, Jonah, because my wife, came downstairs and was finally, fed up. She's like, I feel like I'm loitering at an office. Like this is my house. Like I got to get ready to come down because you got, we had 5-bedroom house. We had one daughter. The other bedrooms were offices, right? I had staff in them, and I just saw the vision of like this getting to a place where I could be financially free, and so I knew for a fact that I could get there. My whole objective was how fast can I get there, and my speed in which I get there has everything to do with my financial decisions to put back in my business. And the other point I'd add to that, because it's not easy to do, and you might say, well, how did you do that, and how did you keep your mind right and not go out there and enjoy and things that were pleasurable? For one, like I understood delayed gratification. In fact, I know it's like one of those things where when you do what feels pleasurable and you're moved by just what you feel like doing, it feels good for a moment, for a minute, but in the end, you're like, man, I wish I really wouldn't have done that. It's like sleeping in. You can roll over, you hit snooze because it feels good in the moment, but 4 hours later, you're not looking back like, man, I'm so proud of myself. Like when I hit snooze twice this morning, slept an extra 30 minutes, like, man, I just feel like a winner. Like it felt good in the moment. In the end, you regret that you did it. But when you pay the price in the front end and you do the sacrifice in the long end, you get to have that great payoff. And so I really kind of understood that concept. And so that caused me to go out there and invest back into the business and make sure that I was diligent with that. I think the other thing that really helped out, Jonah, is that I would tell myself a story that would keep me grateful and appreciative for what I had my hands on. Because anytime you lose appreciation, performance wanes. So, like, and that performance can be tied to your activity work wise. It could also be tied to your risk tolerance. So, if I'm not appreciative and grateful, maybe I don't put in the same investment. Maybe I don't do the things necessary needed to grow because I don't really appreciate it. So, I would always compare to different businesses. I'd be like, dude, I got a health center downstairs. Dude, that was $300,000 I had to spend on equipment, right? I had to get staff. I mean, it was a process, and the odds of that succeeding wasn't very great. I didn't know if anybody was going to show up. I really got it going because of my daughter, but I was like, it'd be great to not lose a bunch of money and break even or whatever and help this thing grow. But the risk was so high. So when I always looked at this business and then compared it to other businesses, which I did a lot just to keep my mind right. So when I fell into this state of like, man, I got to drive 5 hours, I got to do this, I got to do that. It's like, bro, I'm complaining about what I used to pray about. Before I saw this opportunity, I was praying to God, like, God, give me a shot. I got a baby coming, and I don't know how I'm going to provide for this baby. I was telling my wife she's going to have to breastfeed her until she's 7 because breast milk is free. That's where my mind was, trying to figure out ways to cut costs because I was like, we ain't got no money. So when I saw this, it was an answered prayer. But if I wasn't diligent, and I always wasn't, I saw myself starting to complain and become bitter and watch my performance, i.e., risk tolerance, sacrifice, intentionality, vision, all that started to reduce. So I always was, just comparing myself to what it usually looks like to have autonomy of your schedule, to have the ability to control what you're going to make on your own personal pen, and then also to be able to recruit and build a business. Last point I'll make to this, man, is like, even with recruiting, I was just telling these guys, I was like, dude, like, you get all like, you start getting all worried about like, man, I've been trying to recruit and I've only got one person, or I've been recruiting and like I can't get nobody started. It's like, bro, what did you freaking expect? Like, and so I said, let me just paint the picture, because in their mind, they're like, I should be getting all these recruits. I should be building faster. And maybe you could, but maybe it's a process. For me, I had seasons of it. I had to build the character up. I had to develop myself, but I was always doing the activity because I knew that if it took me a year to get two people writing 20K a month, a year, and I could have invited people every day to the opportunity, and that's 40 grand. If I had a 10% spread, I'm making $4,000 a month with just two. And that would be a lot of failures, a lot of setbacks, a lot of times where I'm recruiting for 2 months and nobody gets started. It can entail all that. I'm just talking two. out of 52 weeks. And then I'd be like, well, dude, what does it look like for everybody else in America to generate 4 grand in passive income a month? One, if you're working a job, a pension, most pensions don't. I mean, how many clients do you have that have a 4 grand a month pension? Not common. Let's just say it is. Dude, you got to freaking work 40 years to get that. Or what about real estate? In order to have $4,000 in passive income, you got to have probably a property that's like worth $600,000, which means you had to make $1 million after taxes to get 600 grand. And so, how much money did you have to put away after you paid your bills, after you had your lifestyle? How long will it take to get to $1 million? It could take if you're killing it and you're the person that's working or as a realtor or whatever else, you got to be putting away like $100,000 after everything. It'll take you 10 years to get to 4 grand. So I would just always tell myself the right perspective because a lot of times we take for granted, man, like how stupid this business is, bro. Like it's crazy. Like I got this guy Bassam that, he finally clicked for him. He's struggling, struggling, struggling. Dude, last month he wrote 33,000. He said he got deposited like 22 grand. He's freaking 19 years old, bro. Like, you know, my question was like, how many people did you tell about that? Because like, don't be selfish. Like, how many people are 19? They'd be like, I'd love to make 22,000 my fourth month in. And I talk about college. Like most of you guys, if you're still struggling, you're trying to get this thing figured out. Everybody's got a different timeline. But you go to college for 4 years to get a degree to possibly make $80,000 a year with student loan debt. So you're actually paying to learn. You get out with debt and you're making 80 grand. What if it took you 12 months before you made a paycheck here? Not that it will. I'm just giving perspective. What if it took you 12 months? It cost you nothing and you're learning how to be an entrepreneur. You're learning how to lead, how to sell, how to discipline yourself, how to have vision, perspective, all these habits that will lead you to a better person in all areas of your life. This industry, this business cultivates that, right? Like it cultivates that, and you don't have to pay for it. You get paid to do it. So I think it's just really perspective, um, and that always kept me just like doubling down, man, and like realizing that it's not supposed to be easy. Anytime I got smoked, dude, my deal was like, good. I'm glad that happened. It makes it real. What is this teaching me? I can't expect to be the person that's going to make $1 million my first year. I can't expect that. But I can be excited about the fact that every day I'm developing into the type of person that could eventually do that. And so that was what was kind of excited. I was excited about the process that was taking place. And then I wanted to make sure that in my power, if I invest $300 a week in leads or 2,000, how much faster am I going to build my skill? Like there's a great book called Outliers. It says 10 years or 10,000 hours of practice, you'll become an expert. When I read that book, man, it changed all the way I thought about everything. It was like, most businesses, 10,000 hours of practice, like what is that going to lead to? Like if you're pumping septic tanks after 10 years, how does that help you? I might be able to pull up to the house and identify where the septic system is a little bit quicker. And maybe I get one more job done a day because I'm efficient. What does that make me? An extra $100 a day? But here, I just knew that if I could expedite the process to get to that 10,000 hours, bro, I'm gonna get financially free. I'm gonna be wealthy, and I'm gonna help a lot of people do the same exact thing. And so that's where in lead investments and all that, I was pumping it back in with recruiters, lead investment, because it's like if I've got $2,000 in leads invested a week instead of 300, I've got a lot more shots on goal. I got a lot more activity. I have less space between dial to dawdle because I'm like, dude, I got to work these leads. I got way too many. I can't mess around. So it keeps me disciplined and it also pulls me into the zone and into this flow state because like I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm able to spotlight things I need to tweak and adjust, make the tweak and adjustment, continue to dial, and then I'm able to like really internalize whatever I needed to tweak and adjust. And so I'm just developing, developing, developing. So it expedites the process for me to develop the right mindset to grow the business. And so I know a long answer to it, bro, but like those are the things that I think made a big difference in the way I see it and the way I see a lot of people grow. It's success leaves clues, man. This is the same thing everybody's doing that's crushing it.
That's huge. That's huge. And you said a lot of good stuff there. Where what I took away from that was there's really three pillars for somebody to win on a high level in this business. Number one is personal development. Your income is never going to exceed your level of personal development. And so like I see Kingdom closes on here. Dude, these guys are going to explode. Why? Because I mean, shout out to Yaya. I was on the phone 9:30 last night with Yaya. Dude, they have the right base and they have the right foundation. They're getting their guys like, dude, they're up at 4 a.m. reading their Bible. Well, everybody's still in bed.
Yeah.
They're up at 4 a.m. reading their Bible, then they're in the gym, working out and everything else. And so that's number one because you have to have the right mindset because the truth is this business isn't hard. We're calling people that they filled it out, they asked for it, they need it, they want it, they raised their hand, they said, please help us. And we're helping them with the coverage. And then number two is, of course, work ethic and consistency. And you got to be willing to put in the work. And not only put in the work, but also have the level of self-analyzation where the feedback I'm getting from my mentor or the information I'm getting on these training calls, am I directly applying that to my business? Because people say knowledge is power. It's not true. Applied knowledge is power. And success loves speed. So how quickly am I getting the information and then applying that directly into my business? And then the third piece to your point, where one thing we both did, Paul, which is what's allowed us to get to where we are, we didn't build a business with a scarcity mindset. We invested very heavily back into the business. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong because they see the schedule and they see what other people are doing. They're like, okay, and they're like, all right, cool. I'm gonna get in the gym. Like, these are the hours I'm gonna work. I'm young. I don't have a family. I can do that. I can make that sacrifice. Um, and it's not everybody on this call, but I see agents where they fall into this vicious trap of they come in and they're putting in the work and they're putting in the reps and they're working 12 hours a day, but they're only investing $200 a week into leads. And they do that. And if you're going to have a $200, $300 a week lead spend, you better be grinding those leads. And that's what they do. They grind the leads and they have a successful week and they write to and they have a crazy ROI. And they're like, oh, well, I have the gift of the gap. I must be super talented. And they're like, I got the sauce. And they're thinking that. And then they're going around and they're like, did 12 grand and like, I'm gonna do that again. Well, if you're gonna do that again, you gotta grind just as hard to do that again. And you gotta keep working 12 hours. If you're gonna have that low of a lead spend, what you lack in lead spend and investment, you have to make up for in work ethic. So then eventually it gets to the point where, and I've seen this happen time and time again, where they just get mentally exhausted because nobody's signed up to work 12 hours a day and hammer the phones. That's inefficient. So they slack off or they're talking to their buddies or whatever else and they have a lower week. And then the income is not coming in and they don't have the money to reinvest back into the business and they fall into this hole. So like I'll point out, I don't know if yeah, Ethan's on this call. Like dude, Ethan is a really talented closer. And he's really, I mean, he's popped off. He's our top producer in the office. And he's popped off this week. But Ethan, I saw him and when his production skyrocketed and he started doing 40, 50, 60K a month, he didn't start doing that until he started investing 2 grand a week back into leads and back into the business. And so that right there is comes down to just being able to put it back in order to be able to produce that amount. Where I don't care how talented somebody is, I will take the person that doesn't have the talent but has the consistent schedule and lead spend over the talented salesperson that's not reinvesting back into this business
Yeah.
because the average person will always outproduce that person. So speak on that of just consistent lead spend and how that directly correlates with your level of production.
Yeah, I love that, bro. And I think, what you're talking about with Yaya and the team, like that's such a big deal. I was thinking about that this morning. It's like when you're building a team, and this is what I would speak to, like, so, whether that's Ethan or whoever's on here, depending on where you're at in the business, I think most people on here, if I said, do you eventually desire to build a team and help others go out there and build success, build passive income, get financially free, make a difference in their life. And in doing so, you get financially free and you could do what you want to do when you want to do it, be generous, give back to a church, live where you want to live, have your kids in private. Do you eventually want to get to a place like that? I think most people, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I would think most people would say, yeah, eventually, if not already, eventually, yes, that's what I want. what you got to realize is like you're laying the foundation for what's to come behind you. And so what seems to be best for you might not be best for the team. Okay, let me unpack that. You might be really gifted and you can close, a bunch of deals off of $200 lead spend, but how many people are going to follow that because that's the foundation that you laid, right, for them to build upon, that they're going to fail because they're not as talented as you are with $200 in lead spend. So that's the first thing. So, as a person that wants to build a team, you got to be asking yourself, am I putting in the right disciplines and the right business plan that's going to help my team really grow and explode, right? That's a big deal. Just like I could have stayed local when I was, personally producing because I had the counties locked out for mortgage protection leads. As I started to recruit, and I knew that I had to tell somebody that says, Paul, I'm gonna write 10K. I'm like, all right, bro, you can, but you're gonna have to drive 5 hours to Modesto to do that. I wanted to be the person that was like, bro, this is what I'm doing. And so I intentionally drove 4 or 5 hours away. I intentionally got on flights because I knew in order to build my team, they were going to have to do that. And I'm not going to be able to communicate from a standpoint of credibility or lead by the higher level of leadership, which is by example and by production, if I wasn't doing that. And so that'd be the first thing I would challenge you to
Paul,
think.
can I stop you there? Because
Yeah,
I don't know if everybody caught that. The pe Everybody on this call will doesn't know the days where we had to grind the like we on a Monday, you grind the phones, call all day, and then that night you get on a flight, you drive to the airport, get on a flight to Tennessee, land at 12 or 1 a.m., you get your rental car, get a few hours of sleep in your hotel, and then the next 2 days run as much business as you can, and then catch that late night flight out and fly back home and land at 1 a.m. and get back and try to get some sleep the next day, and then get up on Thursday, do that again,
the
and then
same thing. Yeah.
yeah. So that's people don't know. I wanted to highlight that because I didn't want that to get brushed over, like being on the phone and not having to drive out to somebody's house or travel across the state. Like not to be that
Yeah.
person where, oh, back in my day, we rode uphill both ways, but it's a blessing. It's a
Yeah,
blessing.
100%. Yeah, it's a game changer, man. So like, I think that the question that I'd ask myself is like, if this is works for me, is this duplicatable, right? The other thing that I would say when it comes to lead investment is like, if you're that skilled, then the perspective to look at is what's your time worth if it's spent squeezing leads and trying to call a lead way too many times to get that one more sell out of that $200 in leads. What's that time worth? Like, what is your time worth? And if you're more skilled, I'd argue that it costs you more to invest only 200 opposed to 1200, right? And so that's how I started to look at it because I was the same way, man. When I got started, dude, like I said, I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was driving. So in my mind, it's like I want to squeeze everything. Like give me the 10 cent leads, bro. I'll make phone calls. I'll work 50. And I started realizing, like, man, that's a limited process. That's not what an abundant person would think about, and it's not the right way to see it. And I have somebody expose me to a different perspective. And I was like, dude, if you could spend like 8 hours less on the phones to get to your same 10K because you're not squeezing leads, you're now kind of taking more of the low hanging fruit. What is that worth? And I was like, well, dude, if I had 8 more hours where I didn't have to be on the phones to hit that goal. For one, I could spend that additional 8 hours on the phone and now I don't write 10, I write 15, right? And so now I just made $5,000 more. I invested 800, I netted like 3,800 bucks more in cash flow. On top of that, if I took that 8 hours back because I had less time on the phones, that extra time I can now invest into recruiting, build my business, work with staff. Like I could take it and use it to help build my business. And so I think really shifting the way you're looking at it to me made a big difference because I did the same thing and then I made that shift and I made it early on because I got it. And then I also realized if I could get 1,200 bucks in leads and I could crank out and get to 10K quickly, as I build a team, I'm better off helping them. Now, maybe I've got leads that they can squeeze because they don't have the money, but they've got the time. Well, now I could give them a couple hundred bucks in leads that there's still fruit there because I was able to go through them real quick, get my 10K, and now they can do the squeezing. And they need to do the squeezing because in the squeezing, your skill and character is built, right? And then once they make a couple sales, then they can buy their time back and I have the same conversation from a standpoint of what I'm doing and what it looks like to build this business and scale it and grow it. And so I think that's how you got to look at, the lead investment is what is it costing you not to invest more in leads? Because sure, you're skilled and talented, but it's costing you. The opportunity cost is your time. What's your time worth? And so I think when you map that out, you'll realize that you're going to make a lot more putting back into leads and not having to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze.
Amen to that. Yaya asked a great question. He said, "How do you manage producing and recruiting at scale simultaneously?"
Great question. Yeah. So, I mean, the way I would do that, like nowadays, given it's a different, time back in the day, I had to go get on another flight to meet people face to face. I mean, because there wasn't really Zooms or nothing like that. You know what I mean? You had to get kneecap to kneecap with them. I was just telling my wife that because I was like, hey, babe, I got to book this flight to Hawaii. I got like 100 people that are going to be at this event. I'm going to talk about the opportunity, talk about Pinnacle. It's going to be a home run. And I was like, how crazy? Because she's like, oh, okay. And I was like, remember when I used to fly to like different cities and I'd get there and there'd be like one person there and they didn't have teeth. And I was like, oh, you forgot your teeth today. Like, this is gonna be good. Um, all the time. Like, dude, it was like a part of the biz. Like that was a part of the thing. And so like now what I would do is while I'm making phone calls, producing, I'd be sending out, DMs on Instagram. So if you're just getting started, obviously it depends on where you're at, but if you're just getting started, while the phone's ringing, because how many people know a lot of time that you're spending on the phones is listening to the phone ringing, right? You're not on the phone with the client all day. I'd be sending out DMs on Instagram. I would set up an Indeed account and I would start getting some, people to call through Indeed. And then you just set that up and schedule it. So I would say like, from 1 o'clock, and I would do this while I was down. So 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock, that was my first dial block. 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock was recruiting. And then 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock was dialing. And if I hit my goal for the day, then I would stop and transition into recruiting. And I would do that until I wanted to stop, whether that was 8 o'clock at night or what have you. And so that's kind of how I formatted it. And those 2 hours I was calling recruiting leads from Indeed. We had Facebook ads that we were running, that we were generating leads from as well. And so that was kind of the deal. And then now, once you have a little bit of money coming in, I would hire some VAs to do the direct messaging through your Instagram to people that are in different industries that are similar to ours, whether that's pest control, solar, or whatever, and then set them up where they can be in your calendar from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock. So you just kind of dedicate specific time to recruit. And then while you're producing and dialing, you're still doing recruiting efforts. Everybody should have two phones. And so while your phone's ringing, you've got another phone that you're sending DMs on Instagram through. And it just takes consistency. Like you might not get the person or no, but after a period of time, I go back to like, what if you're just adding that to what you're already doing? Like how many people on here, and go ahead and show me your hand, like how many people on here while the phone is ringing, you're sending DMs out and trying to do recruiting activity? Who on here is doing that? So now if you're all doing that and you just picked up from that activity, because you're going to send a bunch of DMs on your phone's ringing all day. Let's just say you got 5 producers in the next 52 weeks to write 20K. That's $100,000. Let's just say your spread's 15%. That's $15,000. If I told you, you don't have to do, you don't have to put more hours into work. You're just going to, collapse time frames. So now while your phone's ringing, you're going to shoot out DMs and have conversations, set up conversations from your 12 to 2 block, and you're going to make $15,000 a month in passive income. And I was like, I guarantee you, I'll sign a contract as a job. Like, I'm going to give you the money. Would you do it? Everybody in price, yeah, I would do that. Why would I not do 15 grand extra income? Well, the reality is like, dude, I'm painting a very scarce perspective. It'll probably be more than 5 producers you're going to get if you do that every day. And so a lot of times that's how I would trick myself as well. Like if I didn't want to read a book, I thought like, what if somebody said, hey, read a book a month. If you read a book a month, man, I'm going to give you $3,000 extra a month. Would I do it? Of course. Would I read 10 pages a day for an extra 3,000-4,000 a month? Of course I would. But because that's not happening, you don't think of it the same way. The truth is, if you read a book a month and you're developing yourself, you're going to make an extra $3,000-4,000 a month on average every month, because you're going to develop, you're going to grow, you're going to make sales you normally wouldn't make. You're going to recruit the person, you normally wouldn't recruit because you're building, you're developing, you're growing, you're thinking at an elevated thought process. Your family life's going to be better, which leads into business life because you're thinking about differently. You know how to respond differently. You know how to connect with your spouse differently. All those things are intertwined. So if I said that, you would do that. And so that's kind of how I trick myself, Joe. And I'd be like, if somebody told me, even promotions, I'll give you the last example. To me, it's mind boggling. Like if somebody's at a 75% and they know what they have to do to hit an 80%, how the heck do you ever miss that? Like if how do you miss it by 2,000? If I said, if you hit this production, I gotta give you an example. Like Ashley works in my office. If I told Ashley, hey, if you work 4 hours on a Sunday, every Sunday for 4 weeks, I'm gonna give you an extra $1,500 a month forever. You just gotta do 4 weeks. She'd probably be like, for 4 weeks, I'll sleep at the office to get that extra money that's going to be there forever. So I'd just sleep. I mean, I'd sleep here. I mean, it's 4 weeks. That's short-term pain. But yet the person misses their promotion by 3,000, and they all that would have required is instead of leaving at 6, you left at 8:30 for 4 weeks. If you were that, you were a little bit off. Or the last week, you just kind of work all day on a Saturday that maybe you normally wouldn't work in. And now you pick up that 5 points, 5 points on 20,000. That's $1,000, right? So I just think like I would always trick myself into being like, I got to do that. Like if that was the case, there's no way I wouldn't pay the price, and it would just help me make the right higher level decision and make the sacrifice if I put it a certain way. So I think a lot of times you just got to put this business in a certain way that empowers you to take that action that makes the most sense in hindsight, you know?
That's good. That's good. And what would you say for the schedule? Like, let's say somebody coming in where they have the big vision and maybe they're coming in a better financial position or whatever the case may be, but they're coming in, they're coming in to build the business. They want to recruit, they want to build. Why is it important for that person to first produce, even if they don't financially need to? And what would you say that schedule looks like?
Well, I mean, I think leadership by example is such an essential thing. They're looking at you. And so, I mean, that's why I was still producing, 7, 8, 9 years in the business. I didn't have to. Our group was doing millions a month, but I just loved leading by example. And what I realized is when you're not producing, typically what fills a gap is not just a bunch of more recruiting. It's just like things that are less urgent and not important, right? And so when I was producing at a high level, for one, it gave me even more cash flow to do what I wanted to do. The second thing that it did was it helped me make sure I was making the right decisions to spend the right time with the right people because now I only had so much time. But my big downfall is when I got out of the field eventually, and I had a big group where I could have stayed busy. I realized that man, there's a lot more time in a day than you think. I started spending time with people that really didn't want the help. I was spending time with these 80 percenters that brought 20% of the volume, and I became like this person that was on rescue missions trying to make sure everybody was going to be successful. Everybody's not going to be successful, right? And so when you're not producing, the question is, what are you doing? Are you literally on the phones with recruiting calls 40 hours a week? You're probably not, right? You're probably not. And then when you're recruiting, it's easier to have conversations when somebody's already with you that kind of help give them the wisdom to get started. That's more appealing than being on a recruiting call, right? It just is. Like I'd rather have a conversation trying to tell this new agent, like, hey, this is how you got to call the leads. This is what it looks like. Hop on these training calls. What are you dealing with? Okay, let me help you with that. And so that's an easier thing to do. So most of the time that person starts spending time with the wrong people because it's easier to do. And that's frustrating because it doesn't move the needle at all. They leave frustrated because it's never exciting pouring into a vessel that's just broken and always pours out. It doesn't ever do anything. And so when I had my big block in personal production dialed in, I didn't listen to complaints as much. I didn't have time for the people that were just trying to like act like they wanted help, but they really didn't want help. It just allowed me to be a lot more productive and intentional with my business and also led by example. And so I could speak with a higher level of belief and authority because it wasn't something abstract that others were doing. It was something that I was living. And so, I mean, I think those are some points that make it beneficial and advantageous to still do it as you get started. and then you don't know what you don't know. So you're trying to, there's no true relatability. It's like you never really respect the person that's like never done what you're telling them to do and giving you an opinion. In the back of your mind, you think like, fool, how do you know? Like, how do you know? You haven't been on the phones getting hung up on. You haven't been on the phones getting this objection. Like, how do you know? And so like that was my fear, man. I never wanted to lose the respect from my team. And I wanted them to be like, I wanted to be an example of like, dude, look, he's just nonstop producing at a high level. And the speed of the leader is the speed of the pack. And so I wanted my pack to run faster. Well, I had to go run faster.
Yeah. As you're saying that, Paul, I remember I got a piece of advice. This was years back in the business when I first started building it, where it said, I was so ineffective leaders micromanage. And if you're not doing the right things or providing the right value or hitting the right inputs you should be leading, you turn into a babysitter, is really what you turn into. And nobody joined this business to be a babysitter. And you're gonna end up resenting this business. And
Yeah.
as you're saying that, as you're sharing, I'm like thinking in my head of specific scenarios where an agent's, especially like early on in that first office, like an agent would complain, and I just had this a few months ago, where an agent was complaining. I'm just like, I just took the headset and put the headset on and closed the deal right there, and it's like that shuts up negativity real quick. And
Mm-hmm.
last question for you
100%.
on that topic and on that vein, and then we can open it up for questions. But talk to us about building talk to us about effectively building the right culture. And where I'm going with that and what I say is momentum can be so infectious. Like if you have everybody knows that feeling where, dude, you're at a lock-in or we have Summit coming up. If you guys haven't gotten Summit, get your tickets now. Most people on this call already have their tickets, so make sure you guys lock that in. Flights, everything else. If you guys have questions, please reach out to us. We want to get all you guys down there. It's really important. But I remember it's like last month, for example, we let about four producers go that just weren't hitting their inputs. And it goes both ways because when you have momentum, you're unstoppable and you feel like you're on fire and then you're just closing every
Yeah.
person you talk to, you're closing back to back to back to back and it spreads and it's infectious. But also the reverse where negativity spreads too. And it takes one or two people where, they're negative or planting seeds of doubt and then that spreads in the office as well. So talk to the leaders on this call and the people about how to effectively build the right culture within your team and within your business.
Yeah. Great question, man. I mean, I think that language is important, right? Like you identify different countries and cultures based off language. They're all speaking the same language. And so early on, if you can make sure that the language is right, and that comes back from complaining, that all that kind of stuff, like you want it to be where it gets called out. Like if I hear anybody complain in proximity, like in love and truth, I'll address it, right? Before I was a lot more sarcastic and degrading back in my early years of leadership. Um, but now it's like, okay, we got to address it. And so, the language is important. Like what language do you want to have in your office and your organization, right? Like what does that look like? What are you guys speaking about? What are you talking about? And so you got to really kind of manage that. You got to manage what's being said and what's being talked about. Um, I think that's essential. And then I think the other thing is like, behavior. If somebody's just like, like I just walked out there and one of the guys got an office space, so he's moving his office, moving some stuff in and out of his office space. I was like, bro, I said, like it's 11 o'clock, and this is when you go out and serve a bunch of families. I said, who's gonna die today, and not without protection because you're moving your desk, bro. He's like, good point. I said, man, you can move that thing at 9 o'clock tonight, bro. Like, what are we doing? And so his office is halfway done. He's out here down in the open space. It's like, so I mean, just that kind of like, man, we're focused. We're going after something. We're on a mission. And so if the language is good, the mission is clear, and then when you see behavior that's off, you address it. That's important. And also when you see behavior that's worth recognizing, because you're like, man, this is a behavior we want in this office. This is what we want to have. Well, then you highlight it, you spotlight it, right? Whether that's investing in the right amount of leads, doing the things that need to be done for a person to be successful. You want to spotlight that and highlight that. And like the Tampa office, for instance, man, it's such an unbelievable office. The culture is great. The environment is great. It's like, do you know how important it is to defend that? Because think about this, and this you might have a different office in a different location, but just think about like how big of a deal it is when you recruit somebody. If that environment is so locked in and the culture is so good, the culture and environment will do the heavy lifting for you. Like that person will just fall into the right rhythms and habits and disciplines and language and all the things that they need to be successful, which means your business is going to grow. Like your business will grow. I'll give you an example. Like I remember going to the Dream Center and was walking through the yard with Pastor Matthew. This guy walks by. He's got four teardrops on his face, right? So he was consistent with what he was doing. And I'm like, walks by. He's like, "Hey, Pastor Matthew, how are you doing, man? I love you. Have a great day." I was like, "What the heck?" And this guy just has some crazy joy. Like, I was like, "How long has this guy been here, bro?" He's been here a couple weeks. I was like, "Okay, unpack that for me. Like, what was he doing a couple weeks ago?" He was like, he was in Skid Row. He was gang banging, selling meth, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, how? Okay, like how? He's like, well, when they come here, they'll feel so out of place if they continue the same language and behavior that they had on the streets. On the streets, you say, "Hey, how are you doing?" Like it's like, okay, we're gonna fight, and you're gonna get like that. That's just you don't do that. Like you're guarded. You got a defense up, right? He's like, but they come in here if you're not like asking out people how they're doing, you're not sincere, you don't start developing kindness, like you're the outcast. People don't want to be the outcast. And so developing the right culture for different environments and the offices you're in, that is such a massive deal for your ability to grow and scale a big business without much of your time and effort because the culture and environment did that. Pastor Matthew didn't sit down with this guy for 17 and a half hours and tell him, "Hey, bro, let me tell you about our language around here. Let me tell you about how we're going to do this. Let me tell you what our behavior is. Let me tell you that you're going to invest $1,000 a week in leads. Let me tell you how, like, when somebody calls and you get, hung up on, do you bounce right back? You don't get a bad attitude. Let me just tell you, like, here we get on conference calls. We don't miss a meeting. Let me tell you here, when we get on a meeting, we take notes." He didn't have to do that. They showed up and they watched what everybody else was doing. And he's like, shoot, this is kind of like, I guess this is a language around here. And then that shows up with, "Hey, Pastor Matthew, how you doing?" And so it's the same thing. Like when you that culture and environment at office, man, it's the language, the behavior, all that kind of stuff. You got to guard like everything, bro. Like it's everything because you're going to recruit somebody into that office and their ability to get going has a lot to do with that. And so now you don't have to do a whole lot. You just got to get the person to walk through the doors. And that's a big deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We're going on 48 minutes here. We'll open it up. If anybody has any questions, please unmute.
Yeah, I got a question. Hey, Paul, can you hear me?
I can hear you. What's up, Yaya? Good to see you,
What's
bro.
up? It's great to see you, handsome. Can't wait to see you at the summit. It's gonna be dope.
It is, bro. I'm looking forward to it, man.
So, my question for you, when you were building and scaling, I think it was Jake and Kyle. They were mentioning something that you said that hit like a ton of bricks, and they said that despite the fact that you were making millions of dollars in the business, you were also producing to take care of yourself for your own needs if you wanted to. And so, can you talk about the business and financial literacy that is required for a leader? So there's a different mindset when it comes to a closer who's just making a commission, right?
Hmm.
But then when you start shifting into a leader, there you start focusing on the mission of building the team. So if you're doing simultaneously from scratch with this model,
Hmm.
how would you start knowing what you know now? What would you do? What would the template of your schedule look like if you were going to do this full time?
And that would be with producing and recruiting and teaching and training and developing the people in the business.
Yeah, take me for example, right? I have
Hmm.
business experience outside of this industry, but I'm a white belt in this industry, right? But I want to leverage my skills to be an asset to everybody, but I don't want my lack of skills or inexperience to be a bottleneck for the people that I'm bringing in,
Yep.
right? So I want to lead from the front. So I want to start producing with Jonah next week, right? We're
Let's
both
go.
going to be leading from the front, right?
Getting back
And
to
so
school, baby. Back in the trenches.
I love
so
it.
so I'm going to hold him accountable. He's going to hold me accountable, and we're going to be leading from the front. But simultaneously, when it comes to managing our finances, what's the best way to do it? Also managing our time.
Yeah. So finance is like what you're producing in income from like so whatever I'm selling, that's like my job, right? So I look at selling as like the job, the recruiting and building as like the business. So that's kind of how I differentiate between the two. So when I'm selling, my goal is to sell a bunch of, insurance. That money is going to pay for the bills. And then I don't want to go take all the excess and go increase my liabilities or increase my pleasure and luxuries. I want to take that and use that to feed the business. As the business is getting fed and growing and growing and growing and growing, eventually that business income is going to supersede my bills and income, right? All that kind of stuff. That now I'm passive. Now I'm financially free. My income from my business, my system, the system driven income has now exceeded my personal expenses. As I continue to produce and sell, I can continue to feed the business. And that's my goal, is to get that to be in excess of what my expenses are, because now I've got surplus. And that's when I could go out there and acquire a higher liability or what have you. My cash flow is always used to just continue to feed my business. And that's what I'm looking to do. So I'm not really looking to go buy things and stuff from my active income. I'm really looking to do that for my passive income because it's exceeded it. That's kind of how I looked at it. And then as far as like, and then I get
Paul,
to point. Yeah, go
can I
ahead.
add, can I add to
Yeah,
that really quick?
yeah,
Guys, I really hope you took note and heard what Paul said, because that was one of the best business advice I got for building the business. I heard Paul doesn't even know this, but I wasn't even on his agency. I heard him say that on a Monday morning wake up podcast 4 years ago. 4 years ago, and I heard him say exactly that. Me and Claudia, we took that to heart, and that was the best mindset perspective we could have had. And we were super diligent about that, where we tracked it on a spreadsheet. And if you guys want help, we would love to we had a VA track it, where when we can train your VA and like going in the carriers and tracking like, all right, this is how much I made this month from my personal pen and my personal income, and this is how much I made from overrides. And we looked at it where, hey, my personal pen needs to cover my lead spend and needs to cover my personal expenses. The overrides I'm getting from the agency, that's not profit. That's not income. That all goes, that's business income that gets reinvested back into the business. And we abided by that philosophy and held to that for years until we got to the point where we are now. So that was great advice.
yeah. I mean,
Solid.
yeah, advice that I got when I was, when I got started, dude, my goal was like, I thought I could save my way to wealth. Like that was my whole perspective, right? So I was like, I remember sitting down with the guy that he had made millions and millions of dollars in the space, and he's like, "How's it going?" He started talking to me about finances, and I was like, "Man, freaking crushing it." I was I think 20 at the time. I had like $60,000 saved up. He's like, "Why the heck do you got $60,000 in your savings account?" He's like, "You can't save your way to wealth." And I was like, well, "What do you mean?" He's like, and he broke it down like you're gonna save 60 grand a year for how many years? Like how you got to get wealthy by investing. He's like, how many recruiters you got? And then the question is, what's the best way to invest? Well, dude, this business has got the best ROI ever, right? So it's like you just invest into recruiting and recruiting leads and all that. So you shouldn't have some crazy savings, right? You should be putting back in the business. That's investment. And then once I get to a place where my income like was just my passive income was way more than my business expenses, my personal expenses. Well, then I kept selling a bunch of insurance. Once I had already kind of put back all I could put back in, that's when I started to get real estate properties, right? Because it's like I've got all the staff, I'm putting everything I got back in. Like finally, it's like I mean, it's just cranking. It's just coming in. I don't need 12 recruiters, right? I got agents that have 2, 3 recruiters, and now they're doing what I'm doing. And so that's when I started to get into real estate and buying, apartment complexes and buildings and stuff like that. Was with that additional cash flow from my personal production, because I still was leading by example. Um, but as far as time goes, like, yeah, like I'm just a big believer, and I don't know necessarily that this is the right answer, but it's the one that I've lived by. Is like I just believe to build a big business, you want to produce at a high level and you want to be a great promoter. Like when it comes to working on my team, dude, like I'm not like my deal is to minimize how the complexity that people try to bring into this and making it seem like it's such a big deal. My job is to minimize it and just be like, dude, these people sent in a form. Call the leads. Like, have some respect for yourself. Like, what are we doing? Like, if you watch, and I'm not saying that's the best leadership, but that's my leadership, bro. Like, because I know that they're already trying to make this thing complicated. And so I just simplify it. Like, dude, get more families to call. Like, what do you, like, because I know that you'll start spinning and you just overthink, especially a person that's not been self-employed. Now they want to be. Now they're like, "What's my CRM?" Oh, it's my lead. I need to get those leads. That's what it is. It's like, no, fool, you need to get more leads. Like, no matter what lead it is. Like, my daughter closed her first couple of deals on legitimately, I call them Shark Tank leads. They're leads from, like, probably like, the 1900s. I don't know. They're super, super old, right? And everybody's called them, because the reality is, like, you just need to make more phone calls and call more people. And so, like, and I go really extreme, because that's not always the truth, right? There's other things, but I know that's usually the main thing. So I go there. So that way I can get them to be like, all right, I need to stop thinking about this thing. Let me just make some more phone calls. Let me just get some more leads, right? And then my deal is just promoting, like, events, promoting, like, getting them into the office, promoting getting them into the environment, promoting getting them into the gym, promote them going on a Bible study, promote them getting to the summit, because that's where their belief and their new identity is going to shift. In order for them to become a top producer or a person that's going to build a big team, their identity has to be that of that. Like, it has to be that. Like, they have to believe that that's who they are. Well, how do I get them to do that? I get them around a cloud of witnesses. The cloud of witnesses is all these other top producers and top leaders, and now they get to kind of see what they're seeing and think what they're thinking, and trade, substitute their thought process with theirs. So, like, if I can get them around a cloud of witnesses, what is it? Like what Scripture says, like, then you throw off all the weights, all the hindrances. Most of the time when we're leading, we're trying to be the one that helps them identify their hindrances and help them throw them off. Dude, they don't need, like, they don't kind of believe you. They kind of like, yeah, maybe you. I got to get them around a cloud of peers and witnesses that are all doing these same things for them to get it. And now they can run the race that's set before them, because they were surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses. They threw off all the races, all the hindrances, and now they're running the race for what? The joy that's set before them. The joy is the vision of them seeing the success, of having the breakthrough, of making the financial freedom, of making an impact, of buying their mom a house, of donating money, whatever it is. That's the joy set before them. So now they're willing to do those things. And so, like, my job is, like, just to be a great producer and a great promoter, and that's it. So, like, and then obviously recruiting, like we already talked about, like doing that, collapse time frames, and then bringing people on board. If I see something in somebody, I'm going to spotlight it. Hey, come over here, watch me do this. Hey, come listen to me make this recruiting phone call, and I'll do that. So that's me, like, training. Like, I got a recruiting call in another 30 minutes. I'll probably grab a person that, from their effort last week, I'm trying to spotlight and highlight the seed of greatness in them, because they showed some evidence. So I'm like, hey, bro, come listen to this, man. I really believe you're going to grow a big business. Come listen and have this conversation. I'm just highlighting identity, highlighting identity. I mean, so it's a lot more simplistic than we think it is. And that's how I put it, anyways.
Yep. Yeah. And to wrap up, to capitalize on what Paul said, it's a simple business. So my message for you guys this week is go out there. Don't get caught up in the semantics. I need to build out my systems, or I need this. We get paid to produce, recruit, and train. Those three things. And if you're not doing those three things, and for 90% of your time, then you should evaluate your calendar, because you're probably not making the income you want to make, and you're not doing the right activities. And so, guys, drop an emoji in the chat if you took value from this. This was a banger. I just saw Claudia's comment in the chat. Throw down Thursday, Yaya versus Jonah. Yaya, you don't want
Let's go.
Yaya, you don't want this smoke, bro.
Listen,
Let's go.
you bring the smoke, I'll bring the fire.
All right. Paul, thank you.
Love it.
Guys, let's go out and crush it this week.
All
God
right.
bless.
See you guys at conference.